Welcome to the Leela Life Show. I'm your host, Linda Andrews. I am pumped to be with you today. I have an episode for you about transitions. So, we're going to dive into that some more. And I just want to thank you for being here. If there's anyone in your life that you think could benefit from this episode and you're digging it, please share. There's a lot of changes going on in the world. There's a lot of headlines. It's an election year, it's an Olympic year. There is, I feel, lots of controversy at every corner, every turn you make. There can be. A big part of this is what you're focused on. A big part of this is where you're putting your time, energy, attention, and money, as you know, I like to say, and really being aware of what's going on in your day to day, where you're spending your time, energy, and attention, like I said. So, we're going to dive into this. I hope to have some tips for you in here, but this was really on my heart. Transitions can be so hard. Sometimes they're forced, sometimes they feel out of your control. And I hope through today's episode, if you find yourself in any transition, you can remember some fundamentals and use this as just guides helping you navigate that process. So I want to start by thanking Neurohacker Collective and Apollo Neuro. These are two of my favorite kind of biohacking, wellness, well-being, supporting things in the world right now. I am on day 2 of senolytic, which is a way to get your cells in, I believe, synesis, and any of your dying cells can exit a little easier and a little faster, and all your happy and healthy cells can do their thing. And on Apollo Neuro, you've heard me talk about my little vibrating wearable that I just seem to not be able to get enough of. This has been so soothing for my nervous system. If you find yourself needing some extra support, which I don't know who doesn't, and you are understanding of what the vagus nerve is and the importance of toning your vagus nerve, you may really, really dig the Apollo Neuro. So I'll let you go through and check that out. I am offering a promo code for both of those, Leela Life, and you're able to get a little discount. So if you like coupons, that's for you. We will do a little commercial down the road beyond that, but thank you again for listening, and let's dive in. So what prompted this? Through the past few years, there's been slews and slews of layoffs. In the past few years, I noticed different headlines of different CEOs stepping down, there being some turnover. For the past few years, there's been whispers of the next recession, if we're not already in it. There's geopolitical tension, there's challenges, there's just so much. I don't need to tell you like all the things that are, because we live this every day to the extent that you're exposed to that kind of content, headlines, or media. Okay, that's the world, and you may personally find yourself in a transition. Is this something going on in your relationship, in your career, in your business? So many transitions that happen in life, right? We're born, we pass on, we die. We have these experiences, we have these transitions. Sometimes we're in the driver's seat about the transitions. We're mapping and plotting and timing out and controlling every single detail that we can. And other times it is an out of the blue, complete curveball. Sometimes that can be devastating. And I aim to be able to apply this in any transition that you're in. I want to say, though, that there could be an emotional aspect in these transitions that has to be dealt with. And so whether that's with your own support system, maybe you have therapy, whatever that is for you, I just want you to remember that there is grief in transition. Whatever was usually is no longer. And so whatever was, there's part of you, even if it was the most painful thing ever, whether it was secondary gains, primary gains, there's something in what was that there's often grief that needs to be processed. And there's different stages of grief. You can read about this and learn about this. Typically, anger is a part of that. Denial is a part of that. And so as you're in a transition, there is naturally grief, and not understanding the mechanics of this can let you get swept up in it and not go forth in the new direction, maybe as easily as possible if that had been acknowledged and processed. So I share that to just give a little bit of frame to transitions. And as I'm reading headlines about updates on layoffs, you may have even gone through that yourself. Maybe you were just ready for a career change. I've been talking about this since 2020. Like, there's bullshit jobs, there's people that are in quiet quitting mode. It's just like, I'm getting that paycheck, and there is a utility to the paycheck. I'm not denying that there's not expenses and things to be paying for in the world. Absolutely, there are. And often that comes with many responsibilities. So I do understand this, but I think there's a way for this to all look different, where whatever is on the other side of this transition that you're in feels aligned, feels like new breath, new life in whatever that is for you. So, okay, there, I'm setting the stage there. That's feeling really good. There's something also to note. The world is changing. Newsflash. This is as apolitical as I can be. The world is changing. Many feel we are going from a unipolar world where the US is the only driving force politically and the economy, et cetera, to a multipolar world where there's multiple world leaders and world influence. That's going on. Where's that going to land? We don't know. I'm sure a lot of people have better theories on that and could point to that, and that'd be a really interesting conversation to have. But I think just giving that big picture frame as the world is changing, and with that is another layer, and this for me starts to feel like multi dimensions, right? Because there's all these different aspects, variables that are impacting every single given moment. One of those being technology and the which has also led to some devolution, devolving in its evolving, where that's taking on exponential growth and has been for how long? 20 years at least. Some would say 70, wherever you want to fall on that timeline. And obviously some pretty big risks. Some would say existential. I know that word can make people nervous, which we can talk about why at another time. But we have this layer of tech, and we have this layer of the global stage shifting. And so while we're each navigating our own transitions, that this on a collective level and many others, but I think when we start getting into the specifics of many others, like that becomes the more divisive topics, because there's so many different perspectives of what is happening in the effort, in the sense making, in the meaning making, right? Like, what does this mean? Oh my gosh, whatever the circumstance is, doing the meaning making out of an attempt for certainty, to make sense of it, to feel safe, to feel stable. And then what happens as a result, there could be division and the gripping of whatever is the most certain idea. So yes, zooming out, keeping this kind of higher level, and with these global and collective transitions that are going on, understanding where you personally sit in that in your own life, and inviting you now to tap into what are your goals, what are your values, what are your aspirations. Often people want a change, and they may feel in a plateau or a stagnation, and for whatever reason they are not ready to make those shifts that would then be the catalyst of the transition. And so that can sometimes feel slow and frustrating and stagnant. And you're in the transition and letting that be driven by, okay, where do I want to go? What do I care about? What's of value to me? What are the relationships I'm nurturing? Taking a step back and just looking at all of that and getting real with yourself. Transitions, I think, are a great time to force that to happen, because you have some natural gaps and breathing rooms in different ways that before the transition, and that space wasn't necessarily there. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. I've been talking a lot about, on the business side, having your mission, vision, values, purpose. We're going to talk about that on the personal side. There can, of course, be overlap. There can even be identicalness. It's what's working for you in that. So part of what can be hard about transitions is usually parts of the habits and patterns that have made up all the moments before the transition is starting are maybe no longer in effect. There's some change that is happening. This is literally shifting your experience of time that can feel jarring. Like, oh, whoa, everything's different now because everything is different. And so that acceptance piece of, right, where are you ending up after grief? You're ending in acceptance. And then, okay, whoa, this is where we are now. There's a new set of habits, patterns that are going forth in your life. So much of life is habits and patterns. I'll say this again. So much of life is habits and patterns. So having a pulse on your own habits and patterns, understanding what you're deciding every day. I think this is like a stat that's like 90 or 80% of your decision making is from the subconscious, just meaning you have these habits and patterns that are running very much of the show. And if those aren't looked at clearly, you can just be in that autopilot. Part of that autopilot, I believe what we're seeing in the world are just a bunch of kind of shitty habits and patterns that end up creating cycles and systems that can become really big and not that great. I think of abuse, manipulation, corruption. You see this playing out in different ways. And I'm not here to say that people can't be bad or aren't doing bad things, but I do think that underneath that is the 80% or 90% of habits and patterns that their subconscious is running that they have picked up through their life that equal what we would call the abuse, the manipulation, and the corruption. And it may be a lot more subconscious than we realize. And this just happens to be a topic that's on my mind a lot, is like, how do we heal this? How do we heal these cycles? And my belief is that each person becomes aware of them. They become aware of how they're letting those aspects show up in their own life, how they're setting boundaries or being assertive and like saying no more to this. And then they're conscious, and you're conscious and I'm conscious of our decisions, our habits, our actions, our new patterns that we're making and being in the world. So again, that takes that conscious awareness, that takes that decision making in each moment, in each now moment, and being aware of, is this empowering or is this disempowering? The disempowering being that destructive energy that what if that changed? What if there was a new choice that was an empowering habit and pattern that you decided in the middle of whatever the transition is that you're going through, that you implement that? What could be possible? This takes a moment, which I urge you to do, to look critically at how you're using your time, energy, attention, and money, and see what habits and patterns are connected to those. There's a lot of freedom there, and this is going to help support your growth rather than hinder it. In that supporting your growth, just remembering whatever the habits and patterns that you have that are in place that you want to change, all of this often doesn't happen in one day. I love to use quarterly planning. I like to harmonize with the solstice and the equinox. I help our members do that as well as they're implementing some of this in their own life. And in that, you get that natural rhythm, and you could say, okay, today, this quarter, for these next 90 days, for this 13 weeks, I'm going to write every day, for example. And you're keeping track of every day that you write. And the first quarter, you write twice the whole time in the 90 days. And it's like, oh man, all my other shitty habits that are preventing me from writing are overriding me writing every day. Okay. Huh. Well, let's get curious. What are those habits? What's taking up the writing time? Another 90 days go by, you wrote 10 times. You're starting to get more information. You're starting to have progress. You're starting to understand. You're starting to be more attuned to the decision making and the process. And like, oh man, every time I go to write, I'm, watching YouTube videos. No wonder I'm not writing, I'm watching YouTube videos. What happens if the next time I go to watch a YouTube video, I make that association and now I write? And just being gentle with yourself, getting curious with yourself, starting to understand yourself, and starting to understand your own autopilot. And give yourself the grace and the time and the space. What if you write 7 days in a row and you never write again for the year? Versus you could have had this very gradual, okay, Let's see how many times I can write. No pressure. First quarter, did once. Yes, I got the first writing in. And then let those gains start to happen by you being connected to, I really want to start writing. I think that's going to be great for my neural processing and a hobby that I like to do or part of my work, whatever. I need to do that every day. So that's just one example. And it takes your willingness to evaluate, your willingness to be real with yourself, be honest with yourself. And through that process, everything starts to change because you've been willing to have an honest and discerning eye with yourself, and you start to shift how you see things because of that. So good luck. I think it's really fun. It's very powerful. And again, be gentle because these habits and patterns, likely that you already have, are running very deep. They may be generational. You may have imprinted them from those very special ages of 0 to 8, or I like to consider all the way up to 25. And whatever trauma or sticky stuff that helped lock that in extra hard, that's what you're working with. And so to think that you're going to overcome that in 1 week or 1 quarter, so this stuff takes time. I'm not saying you can't, you absolutely can and go for it, but it's about that you're setting up a whole new long-term trajectory. So if you've had a bad habit for 30 years and you are decide this year to cut, you're cutting off that option and you're going forth for the next 30 years with a new habit or pattern. Remember that's what you're actually doing, right? You're shifting your whole trajectory through that. So that's exciting. Gradual, I think, starting with 1 or 2. You do not want to overwhelm the system. So much of what we're talking about in general is just an overwhelming of your system, of your nervous system, of your whole body system. And so, most people are in that loop of overwhelm, in that loop of chaos, and then they want to make a change. They want to create these new habits and patterns, and they're going to do 40. That's ridiculous. You're already in this state of overwhelming chaos, and now you're going to do all these new habits and patterns at one time. So understanding that it takes time, understanding what if you just did 1 a quarter for the next 30 years? How many things would you change? 30 times 4, 120. What would your life look like with 120 new habits and patterns? Whoa, right? So I share all this with you to have some context. That consistency, I love this, that it never goes more than 1 day. So as you're building up this consistency, and it's something, for example, that you want to do daily, and you're in the process of building it, if you create a rule for yourself that says, I do not let more than 1 day go without doing whatever that is. So I'm going to write every day. Okay. It's a new habit. I'm not writing every day, but I have to write at least, no more than 1 day can go by. I have to write at least every other day. So you went from 0 to 15. If in 30 days you stuck to that rule, I find it really powerful. And it's like a way to create self momentum and a way to ease into creating that new habit and pattern. And patience. Okay. There is the shame doom loop that can happen here, where it's I'm not writing every day. I'm lying to myself. I'm such a bad person. And that shame loop, that guilt loop, that can already be baked in for all these other issues from the past. So going to that emotional state of shame and guilt, that's easy. That's part of the autopilot. And as you're making these changes, that's why I like to remind everyone about grace and having that grace with yourself and that compassion for yourself to go easy on this process. I feel like I've actively been in this process probably for, I don't know, let's call it 22 years, or at least 21. The last 5 is when I feel like it's actually started working. And I say it almost every month. Oh man, this is really getting exponential. That's what it does. It kind of starts out slow and it ramps up, and you can control the pace of that process of exponential growth based on your consistency and how long you're doing that. So, that's more reason to start now. Really, please start small. Pick one thing and do it this month as often as you can. And just from that alone, you're going to build your confidence. You're going to build momentum. You're going to give yourself some information. let's say that you don't do it at all, right? I don't write at all in 30 days. Then let's get curious why. Is this like debilitating resistance? Is writing actually out of alignment and it's something that I don't need to be doing right now or prioritizing? What is it? And that's part of that honesty and that curiosity with yourself. And so one of the huge takeaways I have for you is you have permission to be as honest as you're capable of with yourself, brutally honest. And your commitment, your perseverance, it's like to life, right? That's what this is about. It's your commitment to your life. It's your commitment to the possibility that exists within you that you're letting untapped because of maybe some shitty programming. So your commitment to life, to possibility, to your gifts, to your impact, I believe that is buzzing in every single one of us. And it is buzzing sometimes so loud, it's just trying to like shake us silly, like, please hear me, please hear me. I have some messages for you. And when you start dialing into that, there's its own compound effect that's available in there. So that inertia, we cannot underestimate the power of the inertia and you being committed to the journey, persevering through this. There's part of it, like things can be hard, right? I was saying this to family this past week, like this is a hard situation. And it is, and it was. And like just knowing that's what you're in, some of the transitions can be so hard, right? We talked about that grief part. And there may be transitions that you haven't processed or grief that you haven't processed. So you could be 5-10 years removed from something, but there could just be aspects of what I'm discussing with you today that needs to be addressed. And it's going to help move some of the energy and help you have some momentum and clear out some of this stagnation. So understanding that inertia that you can create through your actions, a huge part of that too is like, what are the potentials of this? So I like to think of it as a timeline thread. Pick one of your habits right now and ask yourself, like, what if I did this for the next 30 years every day? What are those potential outcomes? There's going to be blind spots. There's going to be things you don't know. But I think we don't give ourselves enough credit of what we know without our blind spots and just what we already know. And just taking that simple step to understand the potential risks involved and understand how something can play out and adjusting actions accordingly, that moment of inquiry can be really powerful as a risk assessment. So I'm not going to give an example. I feel like that can land. I feel like I also need to do an episode discussing risk. I really love risk compliance and like some of the pieces of it that don't feel good, I can understand. But I feel like as life goes on, I can see risk in such a different way because with mitigating risk can come inspiration and creativity and just like a deeper level of understanding. So all right, I want to end today to make sure that we do a little spotlight on your mission, vision, values, and purpose. Okay. I like to describe the mission as how you're getting to where you're going, like a car, right? The what you do every day. The vision, this is where you're going. This is like that little dot on the map. Your values, this is keeping you in alignment with how you're getting there. And your purpose is the actual fuel that drives it all. So I want to break that down a little bit more. In past episodes, I've talked about this being applied to the business. If you're in a transition, the ability to tap into these right now is so awesome. It's so awesome. And when I start working with a new client, I do an activation session, and that whole session is about cultivating that vision. It is activating into the vision. It is getting clear on the vision. And some people don't have access to that yet, right? It's been hidden or it doesn't feel fully safe to access that. It can take time to chip into a vision, but I believe success leaves clues. And you know what else leaves clues is comparison and jealousy. And so if you ever are struggling or just feeling tough comparison or jealousy and get curious about what is going on here, like why am I being such a hater on da 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 or critical? Why am I keep comparing? Oh, is this jealousy? what little gems of desire are there for you that actually you're like, I just want to go to that place and I don't have the money and I wish I could go there and I want to make the money and I don't know how to make the money. And that person has the money to go there and they're there and I'm feeling jealous and I want to go there. But what's underneath you wanting to go there is you're wanting to have the money to go there, which would take, in this example, new actions. And just allowing yourself to break things down to what you do have control over, where you can redirect your time, energy, attention, and money, how you can take those steps towards your desire is so beautifully part of this building your vision. And it I don't think vision building, mission building, values building, and purpose building is just a one-time, you write it on the paper and it's done forever. You want to revisit this. You want to have an intimate relationship with this. You want to understand it. It needs to make sense to you because that's where you can hold yourself accountable to your actions every day. And like, I really believe there's so much available to each one of us, but the steps in it all has to line up and make sense. And with that success making clues, like there's anything, single thing that you want in the world has already existed and exists for someone, and they've figured a way to figure it out. And so your dreams, your vision, it's figure outable, but there's actual things you're gonna have to do and change to get there. And that's why I love this fusing of transition to reconnect with your mission, vision, values, and purpose, because literally you have a little extra time and space. The train came off the tracks a bit. Things are shifting, and reconnecting with that so you can have future alignment. And you may never have done it. And so if you are literally experiencing the byproducts of decisions you made in your 20s, and you're at whatever age, or you made it at one point in time and now it's a different point in time by the nature of just how time works. Any decision you made before right now, right? More time has passed. So we're not prisoners to our decisions. Things are allowed to change. You're allowed to change anything. And literally, it's funny to me, like, oh yeah, you made the decision in your 20s and you have to stick with it forever. Like maybe there's some that feel in alignment to do that, and that's amazing, but there's other that may not. And just by the definition of growth, if you've been growing, say, since your 20s and you're 50, like you've changed. And so your even ability to make decisions has changed. So be looking at this blank slate. If you're on the YouTube, you can see I have my little blank slate behind us. You have a blank slate, and transitions are a great time to remember this. And I really empower you during this time. So that's what I have for you today. A few brief announcements. I'm finalizing our Q2 2024 calendar. I am launching these supper clubs. They are due to be seasonal. We had a little shift with the one that was supposed to be in February, but that is okay. So just stay tuned across channels. We definitely are having an omni marketing strategy right now. So if you're on YouTube, if you're on wherever you're at, Facebook, Instagram, hopefully you're getting these messages. The email list is another great place to be tuning in. And yeah, if you have any wins, any takeaways, please tag us on social. We would love to hear. We would love to know. I appreciate your support in tuning in and listening to this conversation about transitions. And lastly, if you are a founder who needs support in navigating business and well-being, the Leela Life Collective may be a solution for you. There's on-demand content that targets overall well-being and business fundamentals. And then I offer integrative advising sessions where we can dive deeper into your specific situation. So if any of that sounds great, go to leelalife.co and check that all out. And the last thing I want to say is thank you. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you got what you needed. This has been on my heart and mind. So I will see you soon on the Leela Life Show. Take care.